Hi, I'm Cliff Jacobs from the National Science Foundation. I work for the Geosciences Directorate.
I'm Susan Winter, also at the National Science Foundation. I work in the Office of Cyber Infrastructure.
We're having a little video clip here to let you understand what we mean by knowledge management. We've introduced this term in the context of EarthCube, but we need to clarify it a little bit more. We've had some discussions and presentations on that, but it comes with certain baggage and previous understanding of what knowledge management is. And we wanted to try to clarify what we meant by knowledge management for the EarthCube context. But Susan knows a little bit about this, and she will might talk a little bit to that.
Certainly, Cliff. My background is in the organizational sciences and a lot of work in and around business and for-profit organizations. And there's been a lot of interest in knowledge management systems in the for-profit business area. And it's really been an area that's attracted a lot of attention over the past couple of decades. So much attention that I think there's a lot of ambiguity about what that term really means and what the various knowledge management systems are and what they can do. So there is a background in an understanding of what knowledge is, but that's very different really from what we've seen in terms of information systems to support the management of knowledge. Some people have actually said that knowledge management systems are so different from each other that there's no real point in using the term anymore because it doesn't really exclude or include particular things. In terms of the types of systems that are usually seen in businesses, there are those that are knowledge repositories. These are places that people can collect information about best practices, about lessons learned, can include internal notes about products or about applications and customers. There's also been an effort to try and put together a sort of a catalog of experts within a company. Who do you go to when you're needing information? Another type of knowledge management system is really more of a data warehouse. It has some databases that can be used and combined to try and answer questions of importance. And there's been a lot of work done in the area of searchable documents. Some organizations have tens of thousands of documents, and trying to find the correct information within that set of unstructured data has been a real challenge for them.
Well, all of those elements are what we always felt would be part of the EarthCube knowledge management system. Certainly we have a lot of data in the geosciences. We certainly have a need to be able to search literature, some of which you know, but as we move to the larger scope of EarthCube, and that is the entire Earth system, individual investigators might not be aware of some of the literature in other fields that they're not their expertise. So those are certainly elements that we've certainly had in mind for EarthCube, as well as this other kind of socially networking that we thought was part of the overall system. Did you have, as far as you know, is a social network part of the knowledge management systems?
Well, that's a good question. And what I've described are really the types of systems that a lot of businesses are using now. When you look at the broader question of knowledge management and knowledge flows is where we find that a lot of what happens in the creation, codification, transfer, and use of knowledge doesn't really fit well in a more structured database format. So in terms of looking at knowledge management systems, many people have said to really be a knowledge management system, you have to figure out what the problem is, what's the use that the information is going to be put toward. And that really determines what's knowledge and what's irrelevant. If you don't really know what the problem is, you don't really know what the relevant knowledge is. And that figuring out how to capture knowledge without that context, without the purpose, without the use, without an understanding of the problem, really winds up with information junkyards where there's nothing really of use there. Some companies have gone very much in the other direction. They say you can look at codifying, actually taking the knowledge and structuring it and putting it in a database. Others have said, you know, what's really valuable in our knowledge for our company is personalized knowledge. And what's really important is the interaction among people. As people interact with each other, that's where they figure out how to think about things, how to approach problems, who really understands various issues, and build the relationships where you transfer knowledge almost seamlessly, almost without realizing that you're transferring knowledge. So a lot of companies are putting into place activities and structures to just allow people to communicate with each other. And one of the areas of particular benefit companies have found are what are called communities of practice. These are people who are doing similar jobs but in different companies. So if you put together mechanisms and structures to allow everybody who does a particular kind of job to talk to each other, even though they're doing it in different organizations, they actually learn an awful lot from each other, and they transfer that knowledge and they use that knowledge much more effectively than if you tried to put things in a structured database.
Well, we certainly do have our communities of practice within geosciences, and my personal knowledge of them is that they are very useful in exchanging information. We have a number of groups. But all of these elements you've hit on are exactly what we thought in the broad sense. However, I think EarthCube is an activity in which the community will really define the parameters of the knowledge system that they create here. What we're emphasizing, of course, is that all the pieces should be thought about equally rather than concentrate just on the information technology side or just the data or the files. We need to think of the entire problem in a holistic way. And all of these pieces you've talked about, we use as a community. We haven't strategically linked them in the most productive way. And that's what we're hoping the community will come together and do for EarthCube.
And one of the issues that has proven most difficult for many companies is grappling with what's called a knowledge market. And that's thinking about the fact that people are contributing their knowledge to these knowledge management systems, but really in order to do that you need to think about how much effort it takes them to make the contribution and what they're getting in return. To think of it as a knowledge market, if you're going to contribute your expertise, what do you get back for it? And so in things like social networks, people are contributing because they're also learning things. They're finding that the social interaction is pleasant and enjoyable. But in terms of knowledge repositories, getting a repository set up so that people get as much out of it as they put into it has been a real thorny issue for many companies.
Well, that's certainly going to be an identified challenge that we've heard from the community already about what do I get out of it if I put something into it in this total activity. We're hoping that we'll get some input from the community and thought about that. Our culture certainly is somewhat different than the business community, but I think the underlying metric that you've identified is an important one that we need to ask the community to think about in their governance models and in the way they design the EarthCube. Well, thank you very much for sharing these ideas with us, and we hope you find that interesting and enjoyable video that gives you a little better idea of what we would like for EarthCube and the knowledge management system.
Thank you, Cliff.